Well, it's very nice to see Alex Kann here today, who was an undergraduate of mine between, I think, 97 and 2000, is that?
Yeah, 25 years ago this autumn.
Wow. Yeah, wow, that seems hard to believe. But you actually had hair in a ponytail in those days.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, which I remember.
Yeah,
Yes.
right down my back.
Right down your back, that's it. You had long hair, I know, which was very, very distinctive. So I caught up with Alex, actually, at an English day, probably was it about 8 years ago? Or perhaps even 10 years ago? 8 years ago? The open day.
A few years back.
A few years back, and that was really interesting because you came to talk to us about actually careers in media, which is always helpful for our students, because it's one of the things that people who do English actually do go into more than you might imagine, and I think particularly forms of broadcasting and social media, not just newspaper journalism. It's been kind of interesting seeing, that we've got quite a few well-known people in that field, including Danny Cohen, of course, who came to speak last term. Yeah. So he was there, quite a long time before you were. So this is kind of interesting. But I'm going to read a little bit out from your. Probably filched from the websites of the Oxford Media Convention, at which I see that you're speaking this summer.
I've spoken at it before on local media. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, your career, as far as I can see, is that you started in a more conventional route, sort of or at least you worked for the BBC and BBC Worldwide for 8 years, and then you worked on launching iPlayer, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
And then you went into global VOD projects, digital commissioning, and so forth. And then I think in 2010 you moved into working for the Community Channel, which is what you were doing when we last met, I think. And now you work on Together TV, which I think evolved out of that.
Yeah.
So I've got a number of questions that I want to ask you, but I think actually the burning question at the very beginning of all of this is what is community TV? I mean, it seems to me like a kind of counterintuitive idea, and it was kind of funny talking to Danny Cohen about what he'd done, and I was thinking about things like Big Brother, and I was thinking that community TV seems very ethical. I mean, it seems to be geared towards really sort of valuable community-based projects, and but I don't know anything about it. So, and I think a lot of people may not.
No.
So, can you tell us what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in its first version, Community Channel, it launched in 2000 by Media Trust, which is a media communications charity, and it was during the time on Sky that multi-channel viewing was growing, so there are lots of new channels launching, whether it was Teachers TV or automotive channels or other channels. And the idea really, which was brought together by my chair, Caroline, our outgoing chair who founded the channel, was to create a space for the third sector, whether it was charities of all types, across lots of different categories of charity, from international aid to veterans charities to animal welfare charities. I mean, there's a big spectrum of different charity types, as well as social enterprises and local community groups. I joined 10 years in, so it had been running for 10 years when I joined, and it had showcased a lot of community filmmaking, charity shorts. And when I joined, I had spent 5 years working on on-demand projects. So I joined iPlayer having worked in the digital commissioning bit of BBC Television for a little bit, on shows like Doctor Who and Torchwood and Rome and things like that. Really kind of pioneering the first stages of streaming TV, video podcasting, red button TV, things like that. And I moved over to Community Channel, and we were running loads of community engagement campaigns. We ran a community newswire for many years. We ran multi-year campaigns that resourced and trained hundreds of community groups. But you fast forward a few years, we were heavily grant funded. It was quite hard work running campaigns that both resourced community groups and also engaged the public. And really one of the things we learnt as the channel grew out from starting on Sky and then launching on Freeview and Virgin, and we got onto FreeSat and on-demand platforms, was we really needed to make it much more audience-focused and all about how we can engage the public to engage with their communities. So really in 2016, we span it out and reconstituted as a community benefit society, which is a form of cooperative. So we have a number of owners, members, and through that and some other work we did, we essentially kind of rebooted it and relaunched it as Together TV, with more of an audience focus, really about driving audience engagement and social change through TV programming and then onwards engagement through the campaigns and other touch points that we have.
Well, that sounds so. There's There's almost two parts to that, in the sense that the way you run it is as a cooperative, which actually is, and then the people that you engage with. Sorry, I mean.
Yeah. So our structure is actually unique. We're the only one we know of in the world that is run as a democratic cooperative. But essentially, what it means is we have a board of trustees. We have charitable status, which is as an exempt charity rather than through the Charity Commission. And then our members get to attend our AGM, vote for representatives on our board, respond to surveys, communicate, get sneak peeks of new services we're launching, and engage with us in other ways. But in terms of our output, kind of half of what we do is around programming we think will interest an audience, and we have a very clear idea of who our audience beneficiaries are, and then running engagement campaigns which help people improve their well-being, their connection, and their social participation.
Yeah, so I had a look actually to see what was on your website, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I started watching a programme about Lewes in Sussex.
Okay.
Which is the one which is called The Bloody History of a Small Town.
Oh, yeah.
which is quite funny actually,
yeah,
and quite weird. And then, but you also have sort of more conventional content. So you've got a cookery programme with Nadia Hussain,
yeah,
which I saw. So this is. Can you tell me a little bit more about this idea of audience participation? I'm sorry, I really need to get this. I mean, I understand some of it, but can you give me
sure.
Talk me through an example of a programme which you've made that involves.
We're heavily driven by acquired programming, so we do license a lot of programming from the bigger broadcasters and a lot of UK-focused programming. So as part of relaunching as Together TV, we used to show programming from all around the world, but it didn't cohere as well as we hoped it would for a UK audience. And actually, to engage people, what we found from running multi-year behaviour change campaigns is you can put out messages that basically tell people to do things, or here's an opportunity for you to engage. But in terms of how people actually take up new behaviours and form new habits and then go out and engage in the world, you need to help their motivation thrive, actually. So we know from our viewer data that we can get through Barb, which is the same as any other Barb-rated channel, who our viewers are. We have a lot of viewers spread across the Midlands, the North, the nations, tend to be in lower socio-demographic households, a lot of empty nesters. TV as a platform, really over the last 10 years, has been aging quite a lot, as younger audiences, in particular kids, teens, etc., have declined. And what we find with our viewers is they're really into meaningful activities. So some of that's around the home, things like gardening and cooking, arts, crafts, reading, and some of it's around getting involved in local community groups, whether it's light exercise, local history, heritage, travelogues, things like that. And the way we hook them in is through engaging mainstream content that they're familiar with, and then through that we have onward calls to action for multi-week campaigns that we run, which help people start something new, kind of trigger their motivation, and find out ways they can then get involved in local community groups.
Can I ask, actually, this sounds very tailored, some of the content that you've talked about there, to life under lockdown. I mean, COVID must have made a difference, and did you find that? It was interesting to Jasmine, actually, Jasmine Richards, that her publishing, what she did at that time actually had a particular valency. And I wondered whether, the emphasis on the local community and on sort of the kinds of, I don't want to use the word domestic, but the kind of at-home things,
It was a perfect fit for lockdown. And, I mean, across TV in general, if you've seen TV, there's this kind of slow structural decline in it. Lockdown reversed that, and pretty much every TV channel saw a good bump. We had a very good year of it in terms of audiences who were at home, and as you saw, everyone started baking, everyone looked at their gardens, what can you do whilst you're at home? What we did at the start of lockdown, actually, is we launched a support hotline. So whilst quite a lot of the national charities were kind of figuring out their response, we'd already put a phone number on screen. We'd built a map of all the mutual aid groups across the UK. We were working with them and other community groups. And then we opened up our emails, and then we had hundreds of people contact us through Facebook and emails, and we did a whole load of new safeguarding policies and a whole load of protection around that from people revealing too much personal data. We created a campaign called You Are Not Alone. We made sure that people got food, medicine, support for isolated parents who needed carers, things like that. And yeah, we had 20,000 people come to our website within the first couple of weeks. What we saw with that, and then we had we have an ongoing relationship with the mutual aids, who are 4,000 strong now, local community groups who provide support in the local areas. So we were brokering introductions between our isolated viewers, who are maybe not the most technologically savvy people out there, with local mutual aid coordinators, and we kind of hand brokered those introductions. So we ran that campaign, and we brought it back for every lockdown. And that kind of then spurred us into doing campaigns around Christmas about reducing isolation and loneliness that we did with the Joe Cox Foundation and some other people working in the anti-loneliness space, including DCMS. And it was through that we thought, okay, how can we run multi-week campaigns that keep people engaged, give them things to do, help them look outside their home and how they can engage in community groups. And there's more I can say about that. But yeah, I mean, a lot of what we do in terms of the community engagement is delivered through other channels, whether it's offline or digital. And we do continue to showcase quite a lot of charity short form, whether it's short documentaries or oral history projects or things like BBC Lifeline or programming from the British Sign Language Broadcasting Trust. So there's still a chunk of our schedule that's given over to very community-driven programming, as well as documentary, which tends to be done by independent filmmakers, as well as some of the stuff we get that's been commissioned by the public broadcasters.
This is interesting. So I'm going to double back, because I always think it's interesting, doubling back to you as an undergraduate.
Yeah.
That self that you were, 25 years ago. And I always think it's interesting for our current and former students, particularly those who are launching careers themselves, to figure out how you took the route out of your undergraduate degree that you did, and what kinds of assistance and advice, not sort of, how would I do it again if I were doing it, but I remember you talked about this a little bit at the English Day, about the sorts of things that you need to know. So I'm going to go through this, quite sort of slowly, I think. I mean, I wanted to really find out, when you were an undergraduate, did you do anything to do with journalism or media? Did you have hobbies, or hobbies, I hate that word, activities that you undertook when you were here of that kind?
Yeah, I mean, since I was an early teenager, I wanted to get involved in filmmaking and storytelling. And then whilst I was a teenager, I went to a weekend film school called the Children's Film Unit, which was a place to learn 16mm filmmaking and Steenbeck editing, and back on the days of celluloid. And Channel 4 used to back that with an annual feature each year. So I went away and spent 3 weeks shooting a short feature as part of that. When I came to Oxford, I did get involved with the Film Society and producing short films and things like that, which I could have done more of and been more focused on maybe. But no, it's definitely an interest. And whilst I was an undergrad, I took kind of elective terms. There was the odd kind of film studies course for a term, and I did an extra essay. I can't remember, like a discretionary essay or dissertation. The extra dissertation on a filmmaker. So from the academic point of view, and then from a practical point of view, I wanted to get into it. And whilst I was in my third year, I applied to several film schools in the States, and then got into one before I finished here. So
I remember.
Yeah, so I was lined up. I went out to LA to the University of Southern California, which is kind of jointly considered one of the best schools there, along with NYU. And so the January after, it was January 2001 after I left here in June 2000, that's where I went to. And in that summer, actually, I got onto a TV show. It was the time of reality TV. It was a show called Jailbreak for Channel 5. I spent 3 months in a field in Cuffley.
Cuffley, my home territory. Yes.
Following people trying to break out of a kind of a Colditz that had been built in a field. And Big Brother was on at the same time, and we used to watch the Big Brother feeds as it was going, because that was a big story, series one of Big Brother. So I left that and then went off to the States to study filmmaking, which was a combination of practical and academic work. Yeah.
And do you feel that helped you do what you did next?
Well, I mean, in terms of lessons learned, I mean, I didn't stay the course with it. It was at least a 3 or 4 year thing, and I think there was just a big culture clash, actually. And I think going out there as a kind of strong-headed 22-year-old, 23-year-old wanting to make, artistic and interesting films in the land of LA was probably not the right fit. And I think actually if I had my time again, either have done it later when I was probably a bit more seasoned in the world of work and a bit more pragmatic and less idealistic or naive, and able to kind of set myself up there with kind of a clearer vision of what was happening, or not do that and work, get myself set up in production and be a runner, researcher, assistant, start climbing the ladder, and then potentially go to a school here, such as the NFTS, where some people I know who've probably been 5-10 years into their career have managed to go to, and that has really helped them kind of accelerate their careers. Once you kind of graduate from there, there's a lot of talent demand out there at the minute, and it's very credible and it's well run, and people go straight into industry off the back of it.
So the time in California. So was this a PhD that you were supposed to be doing?
It was a Masters of Fine Art.
Yeah.
It was an MFA. It was a three-year degree.
Program, yeah.
Quite a lot of people spent 3 to 5 years doing it.
Ooh, yeah.
And after having done it for a few months, I didn't feel that was where I wanted to be long term.
So how did that feel? I mean, sorry, it's funny, when you not give up on something, but I've got a lot of students who go out to the States.
Yeah.
It can be quite a challenge, and it's that moment where you say, actually, this isn't really working for me. And how did that feel?
It's one of those things that could have been, really. You could revisit it and say, did I make the right decision or the wrong decision? Should I have stuck it out for a few more years or not? I think there were a few things. I mean, I think it fundamentally comes down to a little bit of culture clash, not really feeling that the city... I mean, I think the city has changed a lot over the last 20 years, but being quite an isolating city. It's a city in which people are in their houses, they're in their cars, they're at their work. It's very different to a European city where you're on foot and there's a different feel to it. So...
Yes, the world of community TV.
To a degree,
yeah.
Anyway, I think the expectations versus reality wasn't quite where I thought it would be back then in terms of the support, the collegiality and things like that. And I made some good friends, I had some good times, but overall, it wasn't quite right. And kind of came back and dusted myself down, and then got a job and did some more studies and started building towards what I'm doing today. Yeah.
It was interesting when we last spoke. One thing that you said in terms of advice that you would give people when they were taking this kind of slightly less than conventional route through a career, which doesn't have very clearly demarcated steps in the way that, say, law or medicine or a profession does. That you talked about the power of networking and social networking. I seem to take that away from that meeting that you had. So could you expand on that a bit? Because it's really helpful to students to think about how you build connections and networks and what they can do for you.
And I think that's still true, because there isn't a graduate recruitment path for a lot of it in the same way as some other professions. There is no there are no professional qualifications in terms of being chartered, if you like being an accountant or a surveyor or a lawyer or things like that. or working for the big four or whatever it is. It is. I mean, in general, the creative industries covers a wide variety of things. You know, the world of advertising is different to the world of TV, to digital, to other creative areas such as other parts of the screen sector, such as gaming and film. If you want to go into the part of the world that is freelance driven, then everything is driven by your connections and your reputation and the last gig you've had enabling you to get the next one, or potentially you may have some form of representation or be on a talent site where people can see the work you've done and get you your next role. And as an industry, it is still fairly elite in some regards. I think it's quite hard to break into. There's quite a lot of work being done by various trade groups looking at things around social mobility and access to the industry, and diversity and inclusion and access to industry. Part of that, in terms of looking at workforce and skills development right through. So, not just entry-level training programs, but how do you go up to middle management, senior management, and through that, where there are huge gaps, and representation. So we run a documentary film fund. I mean, we're a pretty small outfit, but we're really keen to improve representation on screen and authorship on screen. So last year we started, by the scales of the ITVs and the Skies and the BBC, there was a small fund, but one that was kind of very welcomed by industry. We had 29 different industry partners support our launch of it, and we have judges and mentors brought in from all the PSBs and screen funders and folks like that. And we're helping support new voices create short films. This year we're about to announce five 20-minute documentaries about a range of different LGBTQ topics and stories and lives, which are about to start pre-production, and then will be filmed over the summer for broadcast in the autumn. And they'll go into BFI Flare, so they'll do next year. But I'll go back in terms of getting into industry. I think the thing is, there are lots and lots of different roles, and some of them are on the professional management side of it. Is how do you run a media organisation, whether it's TV, streaming, radio, whatever. A lot of people come through from finance and strategy backgrounds for that, and marketing as a discipline. There are lots. So if you look at TV, production is one part of it, and there are a number of roles within production, through to a lot of roles in distribution, channel management, marketing, festivals. There's a range. So really, it's kind of like identify the path you'd like to go into. In terms of training schemes, there's quite a few around broadcast journalism, entry-level directing, producing, production management, things like that. And there are a number of trade bodies that support people as they come into industry as well. Just rattling a few. I mean, all the major players in the world of telly will have them, whether it's BBC, ITV, 4, Paramount, Discovery, and the streamers, Netflix, Amazon, all the way to some of the trade bodies like Screen Skills, your Film Londons, your BFIs, your BAFTAs. So
do you think a good way for somebody wanting to go into this area would be to look for internships, or how, just thinking about how it?
I mean, to look for entry-level roles, to try and find which genre, which part of the world you want to work in. Internships are a funny thing because dial back a few years, there were a lot of unpaid internships for people who could afford to do them and work unpaid for a few months. I mean, we've really swung away from any unpaid work in that way. We do have some work placements as part of university courses, and the people who join us for those, they're usually doing things like strategic communications or other degrees and work in our marketing and digital side. And they're very, very focused. They often go on to then do internships, post their graduate summers, broadcast assistants or social media assistants or other kind of entry-level roles. So there are some internships. I think it's less it's less of a thing these days. There are apprenticeships as well, but the media industry is struggling with apprenticeships due to the freelance nature of the roles. So there's a whole conversation going on about the Apprenticeship Levy, which a lot of broadcasters pay into but are not benefiting from because they can't do one-year placements because productions may not last that long. And otherwise, it's just entry-level roles, whether it's a production assistant or runner or whatever, and you know, you just plug away at that, and coordinator, researcher, executive, you kind of go up the ladder. But I think one of the key things is to really try and understand where you want to be in terms of genre or area. You know, you can move around. I've moved around loads, but certainly if you want to go on the production side, the further along you go, the more pigeonholed you tend to get. And trying to talk to people who can be your mentors, so and open doors for you. So one of the most important things we do as part of our film fund is mentoring, pairing up our filmmakers with mentors who are either commissioning editors or heads of production or running production companies. Because if people don't have access to industry, the mentors can help guide them into it, open doors, advise them on their next steps, things like that. So there is a real value at all levels, at all levels of your career to have a mentor who can help advise and point you in the right direction.
I'm still looking for a mentor, actually.
Yeah.
Sorry, a little late in the day, but
Yeah.
you know, would be a good thing. But it's a very good point.
Yeah. Because you know, so with our diverse film funds, you know, we're making calling card films for filmmakers who to then go on and get commissions, to then.
So have you had a mentor who's helped you? You don't have to name them. I just wonder if I could ask.
I've not done a formal mentorship. No, I've had coaching here and there. I've had very inspiring colleagues and bosses over the years, but not formal mentorship. No.
There you are. You see, you're defying your own rules.
No, I'd love one though. I'd love one.
No, I know.
But I still work with my first boss at the BBC 15, 20 years ago. I still work with him, and there's a guy who used to run. I worked on the soaps in continuing drama for a bit, and I worked with him. He was running the Writers' Academy at the time. We'll be doing some work with him in the summer. So often you kind of revisit the people you know and like and have worked with, and it's a relatively small world. So you know you might not talk to people for a few years, and then through work they come back. Yeah.
So I want to know what the most interesting project that you've worked on has been, and then I'd like to know about the most difficult one as well. Anything that's been really exciting and great, and anything that's just not worked.
Well, I'd quite like. I'll talk about the stuff we're doing now. I mean, I think in terms of like going through some of the earlier career stuff. I mean, working on iPlayer ahead of its launch was a big challenge and quite a lot of fun and kind of mind-blowing in how it landed, and then working on Project Kangaroo, which was something that never came to pass due to it being blocked by the competition authorities.
What was that? I mean,
well,
I've never heard of it.
No, this is something that keeps getting raised again and again. 10, 12 years later, it was a plan to unite BBC, ITV, and Channel 4 and to have one streaming service, essentially as a defensive move against the streamers who were seeking to launch in the UK, which at that time were people like Hulu and Apple, and then latterly Netflix. However, it was seen that with Channel 4 and ITV having a combined TV advertising share of 70-80%, that would be anti-competitive, so it was stopped. And now there's a huge challenge in that you know, the US streamers have come in and been very successful and taken a lot of market share from the public broadcasters' catch-up services, and people are thinking, you know, is there now a way to counter this in some way? I mean, the shifts that we've seen in the last decade have been pretty seismic, and lockdown accelerated it massively. So that whole VOD thing has been quite an interesting shift. But then the things I'm working on at the minute are really exciting, and you know, one that gets me quite excited, and the one that's quite tough is we run these challenges to engage thousands of people at individual level and community groups at kind of bulk or collective level. over 12-week journeys, which we do through sending them things in the post, sending weekly emails, reminders via text message. We have rewards, competitions. People send us their pictures. They send us comments. Have a community group online. And then we track their well-being throughout using well-being questionnaires and things like that. And what we're doing through this, we took a lot of our learnings from previous behaviour change campaigns and then started building in more behavioural science and motivation theory and things like that. And the results are really kind of very, very good and exceed kind of what we thought they would do. So we've just launched another version of what we call the Sunflower Challenge. Last year we launched it to get 10,000 people to grow 100,000 sunflowers over 12 weeks as an entryway into gardening, and then you join community gardening clubs and things like that. Last year we just had a lot of demand. This year we did 50,000 in less than 10 days in terms of registrants, including 9,000 for community groups. And they will now be with us on a journey over 12 weeks to grow loads of sunflowers and then give some away to their carers, to their friends, take pictures, send them in, and go out and join community groups. So we've been developing our capability to do that and localize it at county level. So if there's a community gardening club in Devon and you live in Devon, we can send you information about that.
This sounds like an incredible amount of work, though.
It is. And no one else is doing it.
I just think, well, you turn it on, watch it, and turn it off again. Sorry to be really brutal about it.
Yeah, and this is, we've done the rounds, and we talk to all the major broadcasters about how they do their impact campaigns, whether it's around environmentalism or talking or standing up for cancer and things like that. And there are always social actions, and there are calls to action within them. But in terms of multi-week engagement, no one's really doing that in the same way we are. We're probably closest aligned to the BBC's impact model. A lot of what they do is around inspiring and education and learning, which is part of the public purposes, which we're not really into the education side of it. But a lot of inspiring and believing and connecting and things like that. And so that's kind of where we sit. And we love this kind of behaviour change model, and it works.
It's funny you say this, because you mention it, and I thought initially about the BBC when it started up, and it's as though the idea of the usefulness of television and its social application seems to be picking up something that was there initially with the BBC, but then it seems
and no, it's still there, and long form programming can connect with people emotionally and in terms of knowledge and in various ways that a lot of other media can't. And the Beeb still do it, and they track their impact across dozens of case studies, whether it's for GCSE Bite Size or Blue Planet or a number of different things, or what they did with education during lockdown. We work quite a bit with the BBC. We're doing quite a lot with BBC Local Radio at the moment as a way to get directly to communities, and they're very community driven, because they're all about reporting what's going on in Lewis and local county level. So we're developing ideas with them. Yeah.
I had a question which Tom gave me, but I'll articulate it for Tom. It was a good question actually, because it fits into this, which is how do you go about measuring the social impact together TV? Does it extend beyond viewing figures and online engagement?
Okay, so this is it's a long and convoluted and can get a little bit niche. So where to start? Okay, so yes, we measure our social impact. There's a number of ways you can do that. If you look at various ways of measuring the social impact of any say public health intervention, there are theories of change behind it. We have a theory of change that was originally modelled on UCL, who have what they call the COM-B model, which was developed by Susan Mickey in the Behavioural Change Unit there, and her colleagues Paul Chadwick and some others. Essentially, all behaviour change models or social impact models look at whether people have motivation, ability and prompt, or variations to that. We use a model looking at motivation, which is about encouraging people's sense of agency, mastery and belonging. Those are the three things you need to develop that. And then we have various things that spin out from that. But effectively, you can measure social impact through a mix of data sources, which are qualitative and quantitative. So we run focus groups with people, we run mass by our standards, mass surveys. We have 14,000 respondents last year, so not as big as some, but bigger than the 1,000 or 2,000 survey base you need to run a nationally representative poll. And we have a number of different ways that we gather data and insight. So for some of it, it's about media messaging. So we can look at our BARB figures, which are the level of viewing and who's watching and when are they watching. You can't really pick up any form of social action through that mechanism, nor through your Google Analytics or Facebook Analytics and things like that. You can track your engagements, but what through some of these platforms, we've built a platform through which we can engage thousands of people. We ask them to measure their levels of well-being using the what's called WebEMS, which is the Edinburgh-Warwick scale of well-being, which is a recognised scale. And then we effectively ask them 3 tranches of questions around where they are in terms of well-being and usefulness and connection and other lived experience, senses of connection to their community, and then the level of social action they're participating in. So whether what we're doing is inspiring them, motivating them, helping them engage in new activities and going out and participating in the community. And we smush it all together, all these different data points, and then run research on it. So it's hard because there's no standardization for this. There is a new initiative called OCA, which has been spun out of Wellcome Trust, which will probably have a bit more of a health intervention approach to it. But it's really hard to measure the social impact of media. From talking to the BBC, and a lot of media messaging is, you put stuff out there and then you try and elicit whether there's been a response to it. What we've built, because it's a one-to-one platform, we know everyone at individual level, is we can track at individual level the impact our intervention is having to well-being, connection, and participation and action. But it's not easy. We speak to lots of people who work in media research, media effectiveness, and in behavior change, and measuring this is tough. The advertising industry is not bad at it. They have a very strong investment in improving the effectiveness of advertising. So the iPlayer and the effectiveness awards and the work of Binnett and Field and various others working with them is really very valuable and helps shape a lot of what we do in our marketing and engagement. But yeah, I think to sum it up, I mean, our key objectives is to reduce social isolation and increase connection, and by doing so improve well-being and social action and participation. And we gather that data at qual level from individuals and community groups, which tell us that it works and tell us how much they love what we do. So we film some of our viewers who get in touch through Facebook or email or phone us up, and we get a lot of people who phone us and text us and want to have chats with us. We filmed 3 lovely viewers a couple of years ago for a thing called We Are Together TV. We formed focus groups from our campaigns last year. We had Felton Prism have 50 young offenders go on our Sunflower Challenge with us. We had a mutual aid called Sutton Who Cares in Sutton Who work with us. And we gather a number of testimonials, and right now we've got a research agency we work with who are running a focus groups of 8 of our viewers who are going to be interviewed about the change we're making to their lives. Also running a NatRep survey to look at the difference we make compared to people who don't watch us as well. So, yeah. It's
kind of interesting, actually, that in a way it feels like a kind of social service, actually. And is that how you would describe it? I mean, it's not a concept that's always associated.
No, I mean, we're a TV channel for social good. We're the only one we know of that has, charitable purpose and ethos as its remit. BBC and Channel 4 are both public service in terms of having charters and objectives and principles, as do and they're both non-profit. I mean, as does ITV and 5 Paramount for the other public, the commercial public broadcasters. And more of the other commercial groups are doing socially focused programming. Sky's done a lot in terms of environmental programming. They're doing a lot in terms of diversity and inclusion and funding other initiatives around Sky Cares and Bigger Picture, and Sky News does a lot. But in terms of day in, day out, really trying to have that one-to-one relationship with our viewers, whether it's across TV or a text message or email or Facebook or something we're sending them in the post, or they're receiving emails from us, I think that's fairly unique to what we do, and it's taken a long time to develop, actually, and we're getting there, and we work with some brilliant partners who help us do this as well. Yeah.
But it also sounds incredibly labour intensive, if you don't mind me saying so. So,
Yeah.
so how do you? I mean, how do you get volunteers to help you with this, or how do you get people to answer things at such an individual level? I mean,
We've beefed up our marketing engagement team, but we have built a big engagement stack. So we work So, on our broadcast side, we have our playout and our distribution platforms. We're just launching a streaming platform, which we're working with a great tech vendor and 5 other companies to deliver that. What we try and do is really be quite light touch as possible, and automate as much as possible, and be there for people when they need support. So, in terms of our public engagement challenges, we have this stack that once you're on it, you go on a personalized journey all the way through, but it combines things like knowing where you live, questions about how you're feeling, the ability to send you text messages linked into our emails, form filling, various other things. We've developed that so we can have these kind of cascades of different batches of people going along it. We outsource a lot of what we do to partner companies as well. So we have a fulfillment company that helps us, doing our mailings, and we have a social video company, we have Playout, research agencies, etc. So, and we work a lot with media partners as well, who help bring in external expertise and support that we couldn't do in-house, whether that's kind of creative for marketing campaigns, where we work a lot with BBC Creative on those. Media space, which a lot of the broadcasters help us with in terms of giving us promo space on TV or on demand, or we work with outdoor, print, and digital. And we do work with the Googles and the Facebooks, the Metas of this world, who are very supportive in terms of training and campaign optimization and ad support and various other things. So we are able to harness a lot of goodwill across the media industry. And we also work with a lot of national charities as well, who have presence across the UK, so we can help point people towards local resources. So that's what we try and do. We try and bring together all these different elements, whether it's inspiring programming, local activations and calls to action, ways to reach people on whatever kit they're using. And a lot of our viewers are very analog in nature, so we have viewers who don't have the internet and don't have mobile phones, and we print up leaflets and get local groups to hand them out. We have people only doing a text message version of the journeys, and then most are on email and WhatsApp and Facebook to a degree, but that's really as far as we go. And then we do Instagram, which skews a bit younger, but then
actually this is the other thing that I'm just curious.
Yeah.
So what's your demographic, as it were?
50 plus. 50 so plus, yeah.
Yeah.
So we are not. We target our real our target for our TV viewers, and what we see a lot on Facebook is we target Gen X women. It's typically kind of 40 to 60. It's a big cohort of women. I think it's the biggest cohort of women, straddling kind of analog and digital. So grew up in an analog world, but then got used to mobile and the web and iPads and all that. And there's some really interesting stats around that, and the role of friendship and loyalty and household spend and all sorts of stuff. But a lot of viewers also in kind of some of the boomer cohorts as well, which are much more into print media, still like a printed newspaper, still like looking at TV listings, still like listening to local radio, very important source of news. Radio 2, Radio 4, Smooth, read Daily Mail, Sun, tabloid, so lower income, working class, lower middle class, aspirational, suburban, small towns rather than southern cities. So you get a picture, kind of, and I think not a million miles away from slightly more northern regional focus of an ITV or a Channel 5. And Channel 5 have done very, very well focusing on an audience that is into TV that is more comforting and watchable and conveys something you can learn, something you can do. So through TV, it's harder to reach the younger cohorts. We want to move younger, but it's really tough to do. And also, as you go down through your millennials and Gen Zs and Gen As, the focus comes much more heavily around gaming and YouTube and social as media platforms, and away from film and TV as well.
Yeah,
so
interesting. I had a question from where it was Tom put some good questions together, and he said, actually, do you think streaming and social media could eventually remove the demand for traditional TV channels?
So this is a conversation that's been going on for like 15, 20 years, and there was the assumption there would be a much faster shakeout in terms of linear TV channels closing. A lot of the audience has shifted over the last 10 years towards streaming. Streaming itself over the next few years is going to have a shakeout. I mean, really, all the forecasts we were seeing were the SVODs would hit about 65, 70% subscribers as a proportion of the UK by about 2026, 2027. I mean, that happened in 2021. And what we're seeing now is this shift. I mean, Netflix accelerated the decline of linear TV in this country. I mean, from 2010 onwards, things started to decline. The 2012 Olympics was a kind of a last hurrah where everybody watched telly. But there has been that slow shift to streamers. I think, and what we're seeing now is that shift from the challenger phase, where everyone kind of takes up these services, to a kind of incumbency or even like legacy phase now, where it's going to be all about consolidation. So once a couple more are out the door, such as Paramount Plus, which is launching this summer, and HBO Max, which will launch in a couple of years, then I think we'll kind of see a plateau. We'll see the stacking. Pay TV has challenges around all of this. But in terms of linear TV, the pay TV deals that some channel groups used to have are declining as the model shifts. But free TV is very vibrant at the minute. Freeview's pretty much full. A lot of what you would have thought would have happened is some of the smaller groups, channels R scale, or some of the portfolio channels of the PSBs or the US channel groups would start shutting down, and not many of them have shut down as much as you'd think. A lot of that is the kind of move from pay into free. But longer term, the government has renewed free-to-air TV till 2034. There'll be, the DCMS have just brought out a white paper which says Ofcom will review Freeview ahead of 2025. I think a bit like print, though to a less, print is still there, though has declined hugely over the last 20 years and has grown on web. But print revenues just collapsed in terms of advertising. Radio has been very resilient, but is now finally starting to see a shift towards podcasting use. TV has been shaken out by this. I think what we'll see for live broadcast TV, is it going a bit the way of print? Is it for older groups who are heavy TV viewers and watch things habitually? And then where there are big live events, whether it's driven by news or sports or Saturday night entertainment, those will be the things that retain what's left of the audience. But for things like movie channels, there's no reason to watch those scheduled. Really, for a lot of other channels, people will stream them by default. I just saw some recent research by Ampere Analysis, who look into this a lot. And for internet users 18 to 64, it's about 53-54% split from people watching live broadcast and VOD. So it's about even Stevens now. And there's a really good case study for It's a Sin, which was Channel 4's big drama last year, where the majority of the viewing was pre-broadcast, about 2/3, and then there was a linear audience, maybe 20-30%, and then there was a catch-up audience, which was like another 20%. And so, as with most things, I don't think it's streaming will kill TV. Broadcast TV will decline and coexist in some form with streaming. The other big issue that we have in terms of just turning telly off is universality of access. So if you're a public broadcaster, every household has to be able to receive free TV. And until we have 1 gigabit broadband rolled out universally to all ages, and broadband subsidised for people who can't afford it, to be able to pay to have it streaming services, it's not going to happen. The power for the legacy technology to stay in place for decades is strong. You know, FM is still here. We're still on SD Freeview because we can't shift people onto HD sets and knock out 8 million people who are still on SD sets. So, the same is true at pay TV. Getting people onto their new platforms takes years. It's not an overnight shift. But the trend over the next 10 years will be towards IP-delivered television channels. And the spectrum allocated for free-to-air channels through DTT, and I imagine satellite capacity as well, will decline. And to get really, really boring about it, the TV spectrum that's available for Freeview will probably be under review very soon. It gets allocated at the World Radio Congress, which will be happening next year, where globally they'll decide how to allocate spectrum, and I'm sure the mobile operators will come knocking on the door and demand a whole chunk of it for 5G and future 6G services.
Oh, yes. See, I still remember the days of watching TV. We all sat down in front of the television on a Sunday evening and watched TV programmes together in this kind of community-based sort of way. You know?
And that's increased a lot during lockdown. Yeah. And actually, what the research that comes out of your think boxes and your Ofcoms is saying, you know, the sociability of TV is one of the key reasons people watch TV. You know, it's for relaxation, enjoyment, sociability, learning, you know, various other things in terms of like the need states. But now people can watch on their pads and they can watch on their phones. People do tend to sit in the same room together, but they might not all be watching the same screen at the same time, but it is more sociable. And the need to have second, third, fourth TV sets in other rooms around the house has declined because everyone's just wandering around with their devices. And there are other forms of, so you know, the watch parties and you know, WhatsApp watch-alongs and all of that. You know, we did that all through lockdown, and you know, it's good.
It goes back to the 18th century where people sat and read novels together. You know, you participated in reading out a novel around the fire or something with your family or your friends or whatever.
And people need a sense of belonging, and people need a sense of sociability. We ran we worked with an agency to run some ethnographic study on the role that hobbies and community groups play, and the primary motivation is for belonging. You know, fear of being isolated at home, the need for a bigger friendship group. We saw people who were afraid that once they lost their spouses, they would be home alone and not have anyone in the community to be with. And that trumped, you know, the mastery element, which is, I want to be great at singing or playing guitar or, you know, good at gardening, or some of the other elements to it. Yeah, so belonging is really, really important, and people need it, and that's why, you know, cinema will come back, you know, in force, because, you know, the shared pleasure of being in the dark with other people watching the same movie at the same time is you just can't get it at home. It's hard to beat. Yeah.
So that was brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm just wondering how you manage to, you know, get the excellent content that you've got over such a disparate, you know, geographical range of the UK, you know, because I think you were hinting at this, you know, obviously I'm from Glasgow, community groups in Glasgow do different things to folk down in Cornwall, Dorset, the North East. How do you pitch what you're going to do to, you know, get an audience that will push things forward for you, given the diversity of communities?
It's you know, unlike say a BBC, we don't have local opt-out, so we have a single feed that goes out right across the UK. What we try and ensure is that we have good representation in terms of our content right across the UK, and we find that people, particularly when it comes to travelogues and looks at nature in different parts of the UK, are really interested in it. There always seems to be a spike in Yorkshire when we have programmes about Yorkshire on. We have pretty good viewing in Scotland, actually, and Wales and Northern Ireland. And we acquire programming that's been made by BBC Scotland. Currently, we've got a show called Highlands, which Ewan McGregor narrated, which is about a year in the life of the Highlands. It's kind of very nature-driven. We have another, you know, covering a very different topic about transsexual lives in Scotland, which BBC Scotland commissioned. And we work with community filmmakers there. We used to have a film called Bobby's Bus Shelter, which was about, you know, a bus shelter in Scotland. And we when we used to do community filming, we used to film on the various isles, dotted out to the west as well. We can target our communications to people in different towns and cities, and we know we get really good responses from people across the different nations. One thing it would be quite hard to do is go too niche. So when we've done programming like Lambeth Weekly, say, you're just not going to get an audience of scale to do that. So programming needs to have some form of universal appeal, and also be a window into places that people want to see. So, what have we got? So, coming up in, we're planning June at the minute, and we've got a series on the Dales. We've got a Ray Mears series where he kind of goes right. It starts in Devon, ends up on the Isle of Skye, and we find people love that stuff actually. And that's the old thing of being able to kind of see the world from the comfort of your sofa, which a lot of people like in general, but I think lockdown has probably exacerbated because not being able to go and go and see Devon and Cornwall or the Yorkshire Dales or wherever it is.
Thank you, Alex. That was fascinating. So I'm Arjun, an undergrad here. Mm-hmm. Just going from the kind of the caption here on motivation. So I just had a question. I think there was a really good point raised about measuring social impact. Mm-hmm. And I think an interesting corollary could be measuring the cyclicality of these behaviors. Do these stick? When someone is motivated, is it a one-off? Or do they, for the rest of their life, do they connect with the society or whatever? And so the question is really, so what is the way you motivate? Because I have a bit of a qualm with, the carrot and the stick model. So if you do this, you'll be a better person, versus a complete paradigm shift that, love all or something like that. So I'm just curious how Together TV goes about motivation.
The behavior adoption element is quite hard. We would need to do longitudinal studies for that, and there are some charities out there that do that. And there are a lot of charities out there and government units and Public Health England that are into behaviour change interventions. A lot of them are driven around public health interventions, whether it's smoking less or doing more exercise or don't drink drive or kill your speed limit. Those are the kind of classic public health type interventions. And in terms of media development around the world, a lot of it is around family planning and sanitisation, kind of public health related topics. And there are models out there used by, say, BBC Media Action or Media Development International, which looks at how, and Staying Alive, which Viacom, Paramount run, which are kind of soap operas for social health, which has just amazing, Nobel Prize winning economic analysis attached to it. We track our intervention at a couple of points through it, but we're not at the stage to track kind of multi-year thing. In terms of motivation, the motivation model we use, which is self-determination theory, which was developed by Dechi and Ryan over the last 40 years, basically says you need to move from a model of extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation. So if someone is vaguely interested in, say, cooking more healthily or treating the planet better, you need to make them aware of what you're doing. So the extrinsic motivator is usually marketing, and that's how your Facebooks and other platforms get involved. What we are really into is saying, okay, how can we take that existing motivation and make it an internal thing? There are various researchers out there about how habits are formed and how you repeat things as part of routine. You repeat them daily, and how it takes around 66 odd days for a habit to be embedded, which we get from work that the Behavioural Insights team have done, work that Danny Kenahan has done in behavioural economics. We work with kind of a media and marketing and effectiveness guru who helps us with this, and we've spoken to Richard Ryan, who developed self-determination theory, and other models as well, such as Nir Eyal, who developed the hook canvas for digital engagement. So we have all of this plugged into it. What we find is if you combine a real-world offline element that people can see every single day and tick off and have a sense of reward, and there are kind of things around choice architecture, and a lot of it so I'm going to go off at a tangent here. There are times in life when you're more open to behavior change. And there are various phenomena around this. The reason we target 40 to 60 or kind of 45 up is that's when people really have a bit more time to engage in community participation, engage in community life. There is another peak when you're in your late teens when you participate with community groups and charities because you might be politically motivated as a campaigner and activist and go out on marches, or you might want to skill up and volunteer and get some expertise. But then generally in your 20s and 30s, you have career, family, good times, kids, maybe parents to look after, and you just do not have the time to engage. So really your life changes when people are really susceptible or willing or wanting to make behaviors change in their life are times when the kids leave home, you get divorced, your partner dies, you move to a new city, you move into college. So along with the kind of socio-demographic stuff I'm talking about, there's a psychographic part, which is, okay, I've got more free time and I want to make a change in my life and I want to change me, I want to become more healthy, or I want to get involved in the local choir because I've never had a chance to. There's other fun stuff, which is around time of year. At the start of every year, people think, I want to do it. At the end of every month and the start of every month, people think, oh, it's the start of a new month, I'm going to create a new behavior. There's a phenomenon, it's called the 9 enders. When you hit 39, 49, 59, 69, you think, oh, next decade, what am I going to do with my next decade? Oh, next decade, I'm actually going to get healthy. Or next decade, I'm really going to get good at playing the piano or, whittling wood or whatever it is you want to do. So we're thinking about how do you find when people are most willing and wanting to make a change in their life, how can we get to them and help them and support them? But what we see through our campaigns, because one of the issues with behavior change campaigns in general is if you just send something out, it's very hard to measure. And we've worked with, we ran a 3-year campaign called Do Something Brilliant, which was all about encouraging community participation and local action and things to do. Very hard to track onward activity. And things like the Big Lunch, Grow Wild, Britain's Got Talent, which ITV do, you often may survey a subset of that group and then extrapolate the data up. You're not really getting the data for every single participant at one-to-one level, which is what spurred us into building a platform where we are engaging everyone at one-to-one level. And we know who's opening our emails and clicking things. And if they're not, we then bug them by resending the email, or we'll send them a text message to remind you. There's fascinating studies around a text message at the right time can do amazing things. You text a parent of a junior school, senior school aged child who's about to do a maths exam. That text message is the equivalent of like 2 months of teaching because the parents then study with the child. And I'm just rehashing some of the examples from, I think this is David Halpin's book. In America, they study when people are most likely to churn out of college. You join in your first year, you might be getting a bit overwhelmed, work's getting on top of you, you miss your friends, you miss your family. It's around like week 9 or 10, they see the most dropouts. What they found in the States, if you then start texting the students and offering support at that point, you can reduce dropout rates heavily. So we have used text messaging and SMS to engage people at the right time for attention and also for extra tips. We made the mistake of texting 5,000 people who were on the path last year, and all 5,000 people got back to us over SMS wanting to have 1-hour text chats with us about where they were, what they were doing. And our marketing team had to do shifts of 8 hours, one by one, going through and responding to everyone in person, at which point we realized that level of engagement was a bit too much for us, and we've actually stopped doing as much of the messaging side of things.
Wow.
So it's we've learned a lot in the last year on how and why and through which means people like to respond and communicate.
We had a question coming on Instagram yesterday when we were advertising from James, and he said that he'd noticed that on your website you call for filmmakers to submit content, and he was just sort of asking for any tips in terms of how to submit a film, like things to go along with it, I think.
Yeah, so we we run our Diverse Film Fund, which is a call out to filmmakers to represent specific areas of diversity. And each year we change our focus to improve representation in certain topics and points. And we have general call outs for independent filmmakers should they wish to submit short form documentary or longer form documentary. And we work with some community filmmakers for the last decade who make films and send them to us. And it's funny the things that punch through. So I think we're re-showing, what's it, Yorkshire's worst road accident recently. It's the anniversary of Dibble Bridge, where you remember, and there's a fascination with that, and it's a nicely made community oral history project, but with a topic that hits through. I suppose the tips for filmmakers are, we need it to be, in a factual documentary, real life stories world. We're a non-scripted channel. We deal with factual entertainment, real life stories. It needs to be made with an eye on broadcast requirements. So there are quite stringent requirements around getting to air, around picture and sound and photosensitivity and safe areas on screen and things like that, which most modern filming equipment should be fine with, but does require some technical broadcast standards. We deliver to something called DPP compliance, which is the kind of TV standard tech specs, and then to think about your rights and contributors. So a lot of people who make independent documentaries may be making them for festivals or the web and may not have cleared some of the elements that we need for TV, particularly around things like music rights and third-party rights around images and stills and images and archive film and literary and other third-party things. So, but the main thing is really editorial fit. And the other thing is time slots. So we do schedule the channel in a fairly conventional way, which is we try and hit 15-minute increments, so 30s, 60s, 75s, things like that. And there's a duration within that needs to be hit. So if you don't do that, which is what we used to do, and you take films of all differing lengths, you just end up with a real concertina and mush in terms of when programs can start and stop. Because viewers do tend to start on the hour, on the half hour, when shows start and stop on other channels. With on demand, we have much more freedom. So as we build out our VOD service, there's a lot more opportunity for taking shows of all lengths and flavors and getting them out there in different ways. Yeah.
Great.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else? Any other questions? Mike? Yeah, I think it's probably is the last one. Yeah.
One question. So, am I right in reading that you work closely with is it dementia charities?
Yeah.
Okay. So I wonder what the points of convergence might be between your work for dementia charities and the work you do here.
In terms of my role at Together TV, we will be doing some programming around Dementia Day and Mental Health Week in this month. We'll be showing a film called Grandad, Dementia and Me, which we've licensed from the BBC. Rolling back a few years, we made a series called The Memory Team, which we work with a small dementia charity in West London, which makes biographical life story films for people with dementia. So with dementia, it tends to be the long-term memories that persist the longest and are there for people living with dementia to access the longest as they go through their condition. We made a series looking at the research that goes behind all of that. So in order to make a life story film, there's a kind of whole genealogical part to it, mapping there, but it's like a bit like This Is Your Life or Who Do You Think You Are? And so we did the story of that. And then through that, I was actually invited to join My Life Films. So one of the things I do outside of work is I chair My Life Films, which is a filmmaking charity and a charity in general for helping people with living with dementia and their families and their carers. And we do two things. We do the life story films, which are kind of long-form, lovely autobiographical films. And we have also launched our own specialised video-on-demand service for people living with dementia. So TV can often be too quick, too loud, not understandable for people with dementia. So we've really developed a service with people with dementia in mind, based on research we've done with academics and in care homes to see the content people respond to as a subscription service. And yeah, that's something we're trying to build. It's a brilliant service. The technology is great. We've been working with Vimeo on that, who've been very good in terms of building us out across online and mobile and connected TV. It really is connected TV, just being able to press a button and show it that people want. There's still a big technical hurdle from going from a laptop and trying to sling it to a telly, or getting someone to understand how to use it on their iPad. So just putting it on a TV is the goal, which we're developing. And the content's great. We're working with some really lovely partners, such as Fremantle and Pathé and Kew Gardens, and John McVeigh at Pact, who runs the Producers Alliance, is very, very supportive. So we've got great tech, we've got great programming. Our big challenge, as I think you find with lots and lots of people in the streaming space, and as we will find, the challenge is how do you bring people to your service? With us, we have the advantage of having an existing TV audience and a sizable footprint in social. We've been building up our customer relationship platform of email, so we know who people are and we can communicate with them. But if you're starting cold, the kind of costs of direct acquisition, advertising through your Googles and Facebooks and TV and outdoor, are really high. And so I think that's a big challenge for anyone trying to bring people onto their streaming platforms, whether it's a subscription model or an advertising model. I've been hearing that for years, and it's something that we'll no doubt be racking our brains over for the next few months and probably next couple of years to come.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I think that is time for dinner, basically. So,
cool.
So thank you very much, Alex. It's actually
Thank
really
you.
interesting to kind of catch up with exactly what you're doing, which it seems remarkable to me.
Well, thank you.
I mean, remarkable that we produced you, in a
Well,
way, and
thank you.
And I hope that we did something to contribute to all of this.
No, absolutely. It's super formative to my life and to where I've got to, and the skills and expertise I learned here. I'm using every day in one form or another, whether it's subbing press releases or writing annual reports or selecting content or understanding storytelling. All these years later, one of my main obsessions is narrative and storytelling, and how you can take a dramatic or fictional approach to storytelling and story beats and narrative, revealing story points over time and bringing it into the factual side of things. So it's a big focus for us this year on our Diverse Film Fund is really on narrative. So yeah, I mean,
it's an English-related skill. Yep. Definitely. Okay.
And thank you for listening to some very long-winded and fairly obtuse answers. I mean, it goes right down into detail, but it interests me. It's a real jack of all trades thing to cover everything from the programming to the distribution to the engagement and social impact side of things.
Okay, thank you ever so much.
No, you're
Alex.
welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.